Some places feel wrong before anything actually goes wrong, like the air itself is trying to warn you. I've been on a lot of trails in my life, and I've learned to trust that feeling. I just didn't trust it fast enough that evening. I almost didn't go that day. It was late in the afternoon when I finally parked my car at the trailhead, later than I should have been starting, and I knew it. The sky still had light in it, but it was the kind of light that was already thinking about leaving, that thin, pale gold that doesn't warm anything anymore. I told myself I would just do the lower loop, maybe 45 minutes out and back, enough to clear my head after the week I'd had. The trail was popular. On weekends, you could barely move up there without running into families and dog walkers and people with expensive hiking poles they clearly didn't need. But on a Thursday evening in late October, it was quiet in a way that felt almost personal, like the whole mountain had exhaled, and I was the only one left standing in it. The first half of the hike was fine. Better than fine, actually. There is something about moving through trees in fading light that slows your brain down in the best possible way. The smell of damp leaves and cold earth, the sound of your own footsteps on packed dirt. I stopped once to watch a crow sitting completely still on a low branch, watching me back. I remember thinking that was a little odd. Crows are usually moving, fussing, making noise. This one just sat there. I kept walking. The staircase comes about 2/3 of the way down the descent, a long, steep section of the trail where the Park Service had installed wooden steps cut into the hillside, with a handrail running down the right side. Old wood, dark from years of weather and use, slightly soft in places where moisture had gotten into it. The kind of rail you grip more for reassurance than actual support. The light was almost gone by the time I reached it, not fully dark, but that in-between gray where shapes start to lose their edges. I could see the stairs going down in front of me, maybe 30 steps total, curving slightly to the left at the bottom. The trees on either side were dense enough that they blocked what little sky remained. I started down. My right hand found the rail automatically, the way it always does on that section. The wood was cold under my palm, October cold, the kind that sits in things. I took the first few steps carefully, watching my footing on the uneven boards. I was maybe 8 steps down when I felt it. My hand had slid forward along the rail and found something already there. I stopped. It took my brain a moment to process what my hand was telling it, because what my hand was telling it made no sense. There was another hand on the rail, directly in front of mine. Fingers, knuckles, the heel of a palm. Cold in a way that was different from the wood, not the cold of a surface that has been sitting in October air, but a deeper cold, a wet cold, the kind that feels like it is coming from inside the thing rather than from the air around it. I jerked my hand back and looked down the stairs. There was no one there. The steps were empty all the way to the bottom. I could see the trail continuing beyond them, disappearing into the trees. Nothing. Nobody. Not even movement in the undergrowth on either side. I looked behind me up the stairs. Empty. I stood there for a moment, telling myself what my brain wanted me to believe, that I had grabbed a section of the rail that was wet, rotting, soft in some particular way that felt strange, that the cold and the damp and the weird texture of old wood had just felt like something it wasn't, that I was tired and it was getting dark, and my imagination was doing what imaginations do in the dark on a quiet trail. I reached for the rail again. The hand was still there. I felt it as clearly as I have ever felt anything. The fingers were slightly curled around the wood, and as my hand made contact, as my brain was still trying to form a rational sentence about what this could possibly be, I felt the grip tighten. Not much, just slightly, the way a hand tightens when it knows you are there. I went down the rest of those stairs without touching the rail. I don't fully remember doing it. I remember the bottom. I remember the trail opening up and the parking lot appearing and my car sitting alone under a light that had just flickered on. I drove home without music, without the radio, without anything. I have been back to that trail exactly once since then, in the middle of the day, in summer, with 2 other people. I did not touch the handrail. There are sounds you hear in a new place that you learn to live with.
The pipes, the settling walls, the neighbors. You tell yourself it's just the building talking. You keep telling yourself that until the building says something you can't explain away anymore. I moved into the apartment in February. It was the kind of place you take because the rent is right and you're tired of looking. Third floor of an old building on a quiet street. High ceilings, original hardwood floors that creaked in the same 3 spots every single time, a bathroom window that wouldn't close all the way no matter what you did to it. Character, the listing had called it. I called it affordable and signed the lease the same day I viewed it. The building had 4 floors. I was on the top one. Above me, according to the floor plan, was the attic. I heard it for the first time on my 3rd night there. I was in bed, not quite asleep, in that loose half-conscious place where sounds from outside, a car, a dog, somebody's television drift in and out without really registering. The building was doing its usual settling sounds, the occasional groan of old wood finding its position in the cold. And then, above me, something walked. Not a creak, not a settling sound, footsteps, heavy, deliberate, slow, one after another, moving from what felt like directly above my bedroom toward the far end of the apartment. I lay there and counted them without meaning to. 11 steps, then silence. I told myself it was the building. Old buildings make sounds that are hard to explain. I had lived in old buildings before. I knew this. I went to sleep. It happened again the next night, same time, somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning. Same pattern. Heavy, slow footsteps starting above my bedroom and moving toward the far end. 11 steps, silence. By the end of the first week, I had stopped being able to sleep before it happened. I would lie in the dark and wait for it without meaning to, my body tense in a way I couldn't talk myself out of. And it always came. Every single night, without variation. Same time, same pace, same 11 steps, same silence after. I told my coworker about it over lunch, and she laughed and said it was probably pipes. Old building, old pipes, they can sound like almost anything. I nodded and said, yeah, probably pipes. But I had heard pipes my whole life, and pipes don't count to 11 and then stop. I called the landlord at the end of the second week. He was a tired-sounding man in his 60s who I had only spoken to once before when I signed the lease. I told him about the sounds above my apartment, that I could hear what sounded like footsteps every night coming from the attic, that it was affecting my sleep, that I wanted to know if someone had access to the space above my unit. There was a pause on the line that lasted just a moment too long. Then he said, and I remember this exactly because I have turned it over in my mind every night since. He said that what I was calling the attic was not an attic, it was a crawl space. Roughly 6 inches of clearance between my ceiling and the roof of the building. 6 inches. He said it had been that way since the building was constructed in 1961. No access hatch, no entry point, no way in or out. He said there were no pipes up there, no electrical running through it, nothing, just dead space. 6 inches. I stood in my kitchen after I hung up and looked at the ceiling above me for a long time. That night I did something I had not done before. When the footsteps started, same time, same slow, heavy pace, I got out of bed and stood directly beneath them. I stood there in the dark in my socks and I listened. Whatever was above me was moving through a space 6 inches high. The steps were unhurried, patient, like something that had been doing this for a very long time and was not concerned about being heard. I could feel them faintly through the plaster, just enough to be physical, just enough to confirm that this was not a sound my tired mind was manufacturing at 2 in the morning. 11 steps. Then directly above where I was standing, it stopped. The silence that followed was the worst part, not because of what it contained, because of what it felt like. It felt like something on the other side of 6 inches of plaster, standing completely still, aware that I was standing completely still on my side. I moved out at the end of that month, broke the lease, lost the deposit, didn't care. The landlord didn't seem surprised when I called to tell him. He didn't ask why.
Most scary things don't announce themselves. They don't look scary. They don't feel scary at first.
They just feel slightly off, like a picture frame that's a little crooked on the wall. You notice it, you think about straightening it, and then you move on. You move on because you tell yourself it's nothing, and most of the time, you're right. Most of the time. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I remember that specifically because Tuesdays were my grocery days, had been for years. I got off work at 3, stopped at the store on the way home, had everything put away by 5. It was the kind of routine that runs on autopilot. Same store, same entrance, same rough path through the aisles, same checkout lane if it was available. I didn't have to think about it. That was the whole point. The store was quiet, the way it always was on a Tuesday afternoon. The low hum of refrigeration units running along the back wall. The faint smell of whatever they were baking in the deli section. Something with onions that day, warm and heavy in the air. The squeak of my cart wheels on the waxed floor, one wheel slightly off, the way it had been every time for 6 months. I was in the cereal aisle when I first noticed him. He was standing at the far end, facing the shelves, not moving. A man, average height, dark jacket, unremarkable in every possible way. The kind of person you look at and immediately forget. What made me notice him was his cart. It was completely empty. Not just lightly loaded, completely empty. The bare metal basket catching the fluorescent light. I registered it the way you register a slightly crooked picture frame. Noticed it, moved on. Maybe he was just starting his shop. Maybe he was waiting for someone. I turned back to the cereal and put what I needed in my cart. I saw him again in the dairy section. Same man, same dark jacket, same empty cart. He was standing with his back to me, not reaching for anything, not looking at anything as far as I could tell, just standing. I slowed my cart without fully meaning to, that low instinctive hesitation when something brushes against the part of your brain that tracks wrongness. I told myself he was just spacing out. We all do it. You stand in a grocery store aisle and your mind goes somewhere else entirely, and you just stop for a moment. I had done it myself 100 times. I turned down the next aisle. By the time I got to the checkout, I had mostly forgotten about him. The cashier was a teenager who was clearly thinking about somewhere else. We did the transaction in near silence. I took my bags and my receipt and walked out into the gray afternoon. My pharmacy was 3 blocks from the store. I needed a prescription I had been putting off picking up for 2 weeks. I parked, went in, waited the 4 minutes at the counter, got my paper bag stapled shut, turned to leave. He was standing in the vitamin aisle. Dark jacket, empty hands this time, no cart, but the same stillness, the same quality of not quite doing anything. Looking at a shelf of supplements without looking at a shelf of supplements. My mouth went dry. I walked to my car faster than I needed to. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment before I started the engine, and I watched the pharmacy entrance in my rearview mirror. He didn't come out while I was sitting there. I told myself that meant nothing. I told myself it was a coincidence. 2 coincidences. The world is full of coincidences, and I was tired from work, and I was letting a completely ordinary man in a completely ordinary jacket turn into something he wasn't. I drove home. I live alone, a ground floor apartment on a residential street, 10 minutes from the pharmacy. I brought my bags in, locked the door behind me, put the chain on, something I didn't always bother with. I stood in my kitchen for a moment in the quiet of my own home, and I let out a long breath. I was being ridiculous. I started putting groceries away. Reached into the bag for my receipt to check if I'd been charged correctly for the yogurt that had been on sale. The receipt was folded in half. I didn't fold it. I never fold receipts. The cashier had handed it to me flat, and I had put it directly in the bag. I unfolded it. The printed items were normal. Every item I had bought, the yogurt discount applied correctly, the total at the bottom. All of it ordinary. Except at the very bottom, below the total, below the survey invitation, below everything, in handwriting so neat it almost looked printed, you forgot the milk. I had not put milk on my list that day. I had not looked at milk in the store. I had not thought about milk once. I stood in my kitchen holding that receipt for a long time. Then I looked at the chain on my door. It was still on. I had put it on myself, less than 5 minutes ago. I looked at it for a long time. Then I took out my phone and called my sister and asked if I could come stay with her for a few days. She asked why. I told her I would explain when I got there. I haven't explained yet. I'm still trying to figure out what I would say.